Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Ready to explore some more fascinating ideas. This time, we're going on a journey with Joseph Campbell.
Oh, a great choice. Campbell's work is just so insightful.
It really is. Specifically, we're looking at his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. You sent over those excerpts and intro materials.
Right.
And I have to say, really rich stuff. I'm excited to, dig into it all. Our mission here, I guess you could say, is to unearth those foundational ideas around the hero archetype. What can it tell us about being human, about the human experience, at the most fundamental level?
Yeah, absolutely. What Campbell so brilliantly did was he illuminated this underlying pattern. He called it the monomyth. And it just echoes through hero stories across, all these vastly different cultures and throughout history.
It's like this common thread.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like the DNA of adventure narratives.
Yeah.
It's that departure from everything familiar, the initiation into the unknown, and then ultimately that return, but you're transformed. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a lens we can use to view not just myths and stories, but our own lives too.
That's such a good point. And it's more than just a template for a good story, right?
Yeah.
The intro to the 2004 edition, the one you sent over, really got me thinking about this idea of the psyche's hearing capacity for these narratives. It's like we have this built-in need for these tales of struggle and triumph. Why do you think that is? What's going on there?
I think it suggests these stories, they're not just entertainment, like they're not just something external. It's like they resonate with something deeper within us, They mirror the complexities of our own inner landscape, our own battles, our own breakthroughs. By witnessing the pathos, as he calls it, the pathos of the heroes or the heroine's failures and victories, we get this framework for understanding our own struggles. And, maybe the potential for our own victories too. It's a way to make sense of life, because it can be pretty chaotic.
It's interesting, too, how this need for stories, it endures, even when you have such profound cultural loss. The example that comes to mind, and this is in the material you sent, is the Balkan despots destroying historical sites. But the human need to understand, deep life, as they call it, through storytelling, persists. It's remarkable. What's at the core of that resilience?
It's fascinating. It's how those shared stories, they weave communities together. Those narratives, they become these vessels for collective memory and shared emotional experience. So you can destroy the physical structures, right? But the stories, they remain. And they offer that thread of continuity, resilience in the face of adversity. I think it's the emotional connection forged by narrative that provides a deeper, often unbreakable bond.
So powerful. Okay, so let's dive into this monomyth, like break it down. We can start with departure, right? This is often kicked off with the call to adventure, that disruption of the hero's everyday world, that invitation, that beckoning into the unknown. What are some of the things we should be aware of with this initial call? What are the nuances?
Yeah, so it's not always like a clear, trumpets blaring invitation. Sometimes it's subtle, like an unease, a feeling that something's missing,
Right.
like something's not right. The example of Prince Gautama, the future Buddha, being shielded from suffering, like literally shielded by his father, the king. That's a good example.
I remember that from the text.
Yeah, the king was trying to deny the call, keep his son tethered to this comfortable, easy reality. But the Four Signs legend shows us that the call, that pull towards truth and understanding, often finds a way, even through the most carefully constructed barriers.
It makes you wonder, if those moments in our own lives, like when we feel discontent, like there must be more, maybe that's our own call to adventure.
Possibly. Could be.
And then you have the refusal of the call, right? That hesitation, often rooted in fear of the unknown. Or maybe you're just attached to your comfort zone. Why is that refusal? Why is it so common in the hero's journey? Why is it always there?
I think it speaks to something, inherently human, that tendency to resist change, even when it might lead to growth. Those examples, like the Persian city turning to stone for refusing Allah's call, or Lot's wife becoming a pillar of salt because she looked back.
Those are pretty stark.
They are. And they aren't just these ancient morality tales. They highlight what can happen when we ignore that inner prompting, that thing telling us to move towards something more meaningful. Could be stagnation. Could be a kind of self-imposed imprisonment,
Do you think a resistance, could it come from a fear of losing our identity, who we are now?
Maybe. It's possible. I mean, the familiar, even when it's not great, it feels safer than the unknown.
It's true. Okay, so the hero, or maybe us in our own lives, we finally commit to this journey.
Right.
And then we often encounter what Campbell calls supernatural aid, this helper. And it can take so many forms. It could be a wise mentor, a magical object,
Yeah.
or even just good luck when you really need it. What's the significance of this element of the journey? Why is it so important?
I've always found it interesting that these figures often show up when the hero is at their lowest point, like the point of most doubt, or they're facing a huge challenge.
They need help.
Yeah, they need help. You think of the old woman aiding Kayazimba, or Spider-Woman, who provides those tools and wisdom to the twin war gods. Those helpers, they could be interpreted as, well, manifestations of the hero's own potential, like the stuff that's untapped.
Stuff they didn't know they had.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe a belief in a supportive universe, or even maybe it's the wisdom of the unconscious surfacing to guide them. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? Like, when you take a leap of faith, suddenly unexpected support just materializes.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like the universe is conspiring to help you out as soon as you've truly committed to something.
Yeah.
So then we get to the hero crossing the first threshold. This is where they actually enter that special unknown world.
Yeah.
And it's often guarded by these, symbolic figures. What's the role of the threshold guardians? What are they there to do?
The Russian wild women and water grandfather Didushka Vodyanoi, it's a mouthful, but they're interesting examples.
They are.
They're very ambiguous, these guardians. They're both dangerous and potentially helpful. Like, they embody the seductive and the terrifying aspects of the unknown, almost like that duality of the unknown, peril and promise.
You don't know what you're going to get.
Right, exactly. It's a test for the hero. Can they discern friend from foe as they step into this new reality? It reminds me of how life throws us curveballs, things that seem threatening but can actually push us to grow.
It's like you have to prove yourself that you're ready to cross over.
Ugh.
Okay, last part of this departure stage is the belly of the whale. And it sounds intense.
It is.
Like a total severing from the hero's known world. It's like a symbolic death and rebirth. What's the deeper meaning of this belly? What does it represent psychologically?
Well, I think that imagery being swallowed, contained in something vast, unknown, it speaks to a profound transformation, a huge change, like Jonah in the whale, or Jason, and that symbolic rebirth from the dragon's jaws. It's introspection, intense introspection. It's a stripping away of the old self, all the external identities, securities, everything you thought you knew. It's in that darkness, in that seeming annihilation, that the potential for a new self emerges. Have you ever gone through something that felt like being submerged, completely underwater, and you come out the other side changed?
Yeah, definitely. It's like you have to be broken down to be rebuilt stronger. So, okay, the hero has departed. They've entered this realm of initiation, and now they're facing the road of trials. All those tests, enemies, challenges in this new world, what are these trials all about? What do they have to go through?
Okay, so the story of that Benares caravan leader, the one with the water demon, it's a good illustration. You remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
He thought his supplies, his provisions were enough. But the demon, it targeted his desires. It's a reminder that the real challenges, they're often internal, testing our resilience and our ability to see through illusions. These trials, they're not always about, physical strength. They're about inner resources.
Yeah, like Prince Five Weapons, right.
Yeah.
He had to rely on his learned skills, his cunning, more than just his weapons to defeat the ogre. It's about inner strength.
Exactly. The road of trials, it forces the hero to confront their limitations and maybe discover strengths they didn't even know they had. It's about mastery, but through facing adversity. Those external challenges, they're catalysts for inner growth, for cultivating essential qualities.
So we move on to the meeting with the goddess, this powerful figure, often a feminine figure, who can offer guidance, temptation, or even reward. What are the different, sides of this archetype? How does it show up?
This one, it's so multifaceted. You have the Lady of the House of Sleep, like Brynhild or Briar Rose. They symbolize the allure of the goal, the ultimate goal. Perfect bliss, perfect union. And then there's the universal mother archetype, like Kali. She embodies everything, the nurturing and the destructive.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, those Irish king's sons encountering that hag guarding the well, that's a test. This figure can be a tester, challenging the hero's perceptions, their willingness to see beyond what's right in front of them. Campbell, he suggests that mythologically speaking, woman represents the totality of what can be known. And the hero.
Right.
The hero is the one who comes to know. So that interaction is pivotal for the hero. It changes how they see the world and themselves.
It's not always a comfortable meeting. It can be a real test.
Yeah.
Okay, after that, there's temptation away from the true path. And it sounds like, those classic moments where the hero is tempted, lured away from the quest.
Right. And, our sources, they don't have a specific example for this one. But I think those classic temptations, the promise of power, wealth, or just something that distracts them from the goal, those are important.
It happens all the time.
It does. And those temptations, I think they represent the hero's own inner conflicts, their doubts, their desires that could lead them astray. It's a test of their commitment. Can they stay focused?
All right, next up is the atonement with the father. And this feels like a turning point, like a huge turning point, confronting the ultimate authority figure. So what's the dynamic there? What's happening in this stage?
Well, Jonathan Edwards, he depicted God as wrathful. And that really highlights what Campbell calls the ogre aspect of the father, like that terrifying judgmental force. But on the other hand, you have Shiva. He embodies both destruction and creation, which gives us a more nuanced view. This stage, it's not always about a literal father figure, a deity. It's about confronting those internalized authority figures, like societal expectations, and ultimately reconciling with the source of our being. Understanding its complexities and moving beyond simple ideas of judgment, it can lead to greater self-acceptance, more autonomy.
So it's more about understanding those opposing forces within that ultimate authority figure.
Yeah, exactly. It's about moving towards a more mature understanding of power and authority, both internal and external.
After that, we have apotheosis. This is where the hero realizes their own divine potential, or maybe reaches a state of, expanded consciousness. What does this look like for the hero? What are we talking about here?
You have the transfiguration of Jesus, or Krishna revealing his universal form to Arjuna. Those are powerful examples. It's profound clarity. The hero transcends their ego, recognizes a deeper connection to something larger than themselves. It's not about literally becoming a god. It's about understanding your worth, your potential, and your connection to everything. It's a shift in perspective.
Wow. It sounds like a truly transformative experience. Okay, so the hero has gone through initiation. Now comes the return. But the journey back, it's not always easy, is it? First, there's the potential refusal of the return. Why would the hero, after all this, want to stay in that special world?
It makes sense if you think about it. They've experienced something extraordinary. So the ordinary world might seem, dull or limiting.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Like Aisen, he wanted to stay in Tirna Anog, the land of youth. And why not? Why go back to suffering and mortality after experiencing something transcendent? It speaks to the allure of the ideal and how difficult it can be to bring that experience back into everyday life.
I get it. Like, you wake up from an amazing dream and you're bummed to be back in reality. And if they resist coming back, they might have to go through the magic flight, this pursuit where they need help to escape. What's the significance of that chase? Why is it important?
Think about Gwen Bach, the Welsh tale, and all his transformations while he's fleeing Caradwyn, or Izanagi escaping the underworld. They had to be resourceful, and often unexpected help appears. Those magical elements, I think they symbolize the extraordinary abilities, or maybe just the circumstances that show up when the hero is between worlds. Not quite in the special world, but not back in the ordinary world either.
Okay, and sometimes the hero just can't make it back on their own. They need rescue from without. Why would that be necessary? Why do they need help?
Well, Inanna, she needed rescue from the underworld, and I think it shows that the journey, that transformation, it can be so profound that the hero can't navigate the ordinary world anymore, like they've changed too much.
They need help getting back.
Yeah, they need someone to pull them back, help them bridge that gap between the extraordinary and the everyday. It speaks to the importance of community, support systems, especially after a big life change.
That's a good point. Then there's the crossing of the return threshold, the actual re-entry into the familiar world. What are the challenges there? What might the hero face at this point?
You have Muetsi and those freed children. They come back to the day world, right? But they're different. The world might seem different to them too. And it might be hard to fit back into their old roles. They have to find a way to bring that wisdom, those insights from the special world back into their everyday lives.
So the hero isn't the same. They've achieved this state of master of two worlds. What does that integration look like? How do they manage both worlds?
It's about balance. Being able to move between the spiritual inner world and the material external world, bringing insights from one to the other. It's the ultimate integration of everything they've gone through.
And finally, they achieve freedom to live, the ultimate reward. What does that liberation mean? What does it look like?
It's freedom from fear of death, a total embrace of the present moment. They've faced their fears, they've gained wisdom, they can live authentically. Taliesin, his song about the imperishable within, that speaks to transcending the ego. and recognizing something eternal.
This whole journey, it's just such a powerful framework for understanding, well, everything. It really makes you think about the nature of myth itself. And, our sources, they say that myths are a consciously controlled communication of traditional wisdom.
Right.
Unlike dreams, which are more spontaneous. What's the key difference there? What makes myths different from dreams?
Both tap into the unconscious, but myths, they're shaped and refined over time. They're meant to convey cultural values, beliefs, understandings about the world. They're designed to guide us, to instruct us. They connect those abstract insights from the unconscious to, wow, practical living.
It's interesting. And then there's the concept of the universal round. These cycles of creation, destruction, and renewal. And they're everywhere. So many different mythologies. What does that tell us about how humans understand the cosmos, the universe?
I think these cyclical patterns, like the Jain Wheel of Time or the Hindu yugas, they suggest we understand the universe as being in constant motion, this continuous process of transformation and rebirth. It's recognizing that things are impermanent and that existence itself is cyclical.
It's a big idea. And the motif of the one into the manifold. This creation of the world through the separation of a primal unity into all these different forms. Why is that such a common theme? Why does it show up everywhere?
It's our fundamental experience of the world, isn't it? We're all interconnected but also distinct. It's the origin of diversity from a singular source. And that idea, it resonates across different philosophies, spiritual traditions.
Then you have the virgin birth, this symbol of miraculous origins and the potential for the extraordinary within the ordinary. What does that archetype signify? What's it all about?
I think it symbolizes the emergence of something new, something significant, something that goes beyond our conventional limitations. It's that idea that even in ordinary circumstances, there's potential for the extraordinary.
It's fascinating, too, how the hero, they often undergo these incredible transformations,
Right.
either from birth or through their journey. It really highlights their unique nature, that connection to something bigger than themselves. They embody change, breaking boundaries. But our sources also point out that the hero isn't always purely good. There's the potential for the hero as emperor and tyrant. Why is that important to consider?
It's a reminder, even those who achieve great things, who have power, they can be corrupted by ego, by unchecked authority. It highlights the responsibility that comes with potential and the dangers of straying from your path.
And of course, there's the hero's eventual departure, often involving a symbolic death or a journey to another realm. What does that tell us about the hero's role?
I think it suggests that the hero's work, in the ordinary world, it has a conclusion. And their destiny, maybe it lies beyond what we know. It's the end of one cycle and the beginning of another.
Myths also explore dissolutions, the end of life, and the end of the world itself. These narratives of destruction and ending, they're so prominent. Why?
Those narratives of dissolution, like Ragnarok or prophecies of the end times, they often carry the seeds of renewal. They remind us that everything is impermanent. But there's also potential for rebirth. Death isn't always the end, it's a transition.
You're going back to that idea of community, myth, and society. They're so intertwined. Myths provide that shared understanding of the world, our place in it.
Exactly. They're a framework for cultural identity, values, beliefs. They give us guidance, meaning, and a sense of belonging. The structure of the Navajo Hogan, it mirrors their creation myths. It's that beautiful connection between myth and lived experience.
And then you have cult and meditation. Alongside the understanding of myth, they help us to shift our consciousness, to see beyond the surface level of ourselves. How do they do that?
They encourage introspection, detachment from the ego, deeper exploration of the self. It's about moving beyond the surface, to connect with those universal patterns that myths embody. The meditation, I am not that, that's a perfect example of self-transcendence.
So bringing it all back to the present, what about the hero today? Is this ancient framework still relevant for us now in the modern world with all its complexities?
Oh, absolutely. At its core, the hero's journey is about personal transformation, facing challenges, finding meaning. Those are timeless. It doesn't matter if it's a career change, a personal crisis, or just trying to figure out your place in the world. The monomyth, it gives us a way to understand our own journeys, our own potential for growth.
This deep dive into Joseph Campbell's work, it's been so insightful. That cyclical nature of life, the constant transformation, it's amazing.
It really is. And as Campbell said, maybe tragedy and comedy, they're two sides of the same coin. Tragedy is the shattering of the old. Comedy is the joy that continues.
It makes you think about recognizing those generally valid, normally human forms beneath our own limitations. As Campbell put it, that's the key to unlocking those primary springs of human life and thought. And the hero's return, transfigured, that embodies the idea of renewal.
I love that he uses the word transfigured. It's such a powerful word, and it's a really thought-provoking idea to consider those standard metamorphoses that we all go through, like recognizing the calls, the thresholds, the trials. It can really illuminate our own adventures and that unquenched source, as he says, through which society is reborn.
I love that. That's a great note to end on. So, to our listeners out there, what thresholds are you facing right now? What inner resources, what supernatural aid might be available to you? What will you discover on your own deep dive? Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This was great.